Go through some basic 6L80, 6L90 tuning for GM vehicles. Go through a basic quick rundown that'll be applicable to any pickup car, SUV with the 6L80, 6L90. So start here, transmission tab. These are your commanded controls. This is if you're using a scanner and you're actually logging and you're looking to lock a gear, etc. Let's see, we'll start with shift general. So usually you don't have to touch these unless you're looking to enable tap shift on like a Chevy Caprice or something. Same with the shift inertia. I generally don't touch these. The higher number, the more aggressive the shift. That's the shift inertia table that it references. So the higher the number, the more aggressive. Generally don't need to touch those. Shift scheduling. This is your speeds that the transmission shifts at in different modes. Basically, this is automatic unless you want to just fine tune full throttle maybe. Let's say you increased your shift RPM, then you'll have to increase the full throttle by a mile per hour or two. There's a Blue Cat software too that works well if you could find it. But basically, if you change your tire size, go to the Gear Tires wizard, and let's say if you go online, you look up your tire size and it says it's a 35-inch. You want to go a ½ inch to an inch smaller. So if your tires are labeled as 35-inch online, put it 34 here. It should work good. I think Matt Stafford does a ½ inch, but I notice sometimes you have to reduce it a little bit more. And the gear ratio obviously stays the same unless you change your gear ratio. And then you hit adjust and adjust your shift miles per hour that we were just looking at in shift scheduling. Shift pressures. So this is a stock file, modified file. I added 200 to this file, or to this tab and to this tab. Let's see. Then we go to Upshift. So generally shift pressures on the truck, I add about 100 to 150. Cars, you could do a little bit more. You get a little more aggressive. You get add about 200 to these tables. And I do a uniform. So if I do 150, I do it all across to all three patterns, 2-3 shift. So there's a stock. There's my new updated file. 150 is the difference. So you increase these numbers for firmer shift. Downshift, I generally don't touch unless there's some issues. Shift timing. So this is a torque adder. Basically, I reduce this whole table by about 75%, 70%. You could probably go a little more aggressive on the cars too, but let's say that's the stock table. This is my table. So you see how my numbers are much lower than stock. I do that for all 6 gears. And the special tab, which some trucks do have a special mode, some don't. The cars do, obviously, when you kick it into sport or tap shift. This is the mode that it references. So you can get more aggressive with this. This way your sport mode is a little bit more aggressive when you're really ripping it. So you could tell that's the stock file, and that's how much I reduce it. So to reduce it, you basically just highlight the tab, 0.75, multiply. I would start something around there. Transition time. Generally, you don't need to touch these unless it's like a highly modded vehicle and you're really looking to modify the shifts and get the max out of them. On the trucks, I leave them alone. On some of the cars like G8, CTSV, I'll touch these a little bit. Basically, you want to reduce these tabs. Also, what you could do is just take your special numbers. See how on inertia 9, it's 0.17, and then on normal, it's 0.24. You could basically copy all the specials over to normal. That works pretty well a lot of the times. Output factor, don't touch those. They're all different on all the platforms. You really shouldn't have to touch them. Downshift, I also don't touch. Torque converter, you want to turn off any TCC desired slip on these. So basically that's the stock file. I got 0 all across all of these, 0. My DOD is disabled just in case. I keep it uniform, 0. apply release. So these are the speeds that your converter locks at. On a cammed vehicle, you might want to increase these a little bit. Some guys just don't want the vehicle to lock in like second or third. So what you do with that is you just take this and you make it about 300 mile per hour. That'll never be achieved. So that's if you don't want your converter to lock in second and third. I mean, if you're having trouble with like fourth gear where it's lugging a little bit, just add 5 miles per hour to that and go from there. Let's see. Shift timing we went through. Torque management. I generally leave most of this stuff. On the cars, you could disable more of it. On the trucks, I highly recommend you leave it alone. The only thing I touch is tip-in torque management, which is when you tip into the throttle. So factory is no throttle. What I do is none. So that means no torque management for tip-in. On the cars, you could disable it, but I would recommend leaving it alone. There's another tab I'll show you at the end of the video that's more beneficial to touch. It's shift scheduling, shift pressures. The adaptives we'll go to next. So you could enable and disable the adaptives. I generally leave them enabled unless you're having a truck that's really kicking your ass. Sometimes if somebody swaps a transmission and it's a GM reman, they just have a hard time relearning. Sometimes you just have to disable the adaptations. But basically what I do for the oncoming presets, so you have your 1-2 normal shift and your 1-2 special mode. Basically you increase these numbers to firm up the shifts. So let's say you tune a vehicle and it's shifting great, and then after a week or two, it seems to adapt and it's soft and sloppy again. You need to go through and you need to adjust these. What I do is on like a basic bolt-on pickup is these are the factory tables. I'll increase these numbers, the first set by about 50, the second two by about 80. On the cars, this table here, the number 2 tab, you can get pretty aggressive. You can make this number 750, 800. You can get pretty aggressive, and especially in the specials tab. So if you want your car to shift a lot firmer in like sport mode or tap mode, you go a lot more aggressive on these. You would probably just say, add, let's say 100. Then I would do another 100 on these two modes. So basically what this is 0 is like light throttle. 1 is about moderate throttle. 2 is when you're full tilt, full throttle. And those are your adaptation tabs. Off-coming, I generally don't touch unless you're having some kind of shift flares after the shift. Then you'll have to try to increase these and see if you can get that to clear up. Shift flares are weird to explain. You'll see it in a log if you have it. Let's see, torque management. These tabs I don't touch. Last thing, we'll go to the engine side torque management. So what I do here is you can't max all these out like you could on like the Gen 3. Sometimes they are, like this table is, like peak torque. What I'll do on this is just highlight the table and multiply it by 10%. You just want to make minor changes like that. Trans output max. Let's see what I did on this one. You could double all of these, but don't max them out to the 96,000. Some trucks just don't like that. Let's see. Yeah, and that's about it for the transmission. Brake torque management, leave that alone. Let's see if there's anything else. Let's see, speedometer. If you want to disable the speed limiter, you got to switch this to calibration, and then make these whatever you want your new speed limiter to be. And then you do have to do a right entire. After you save this file, you do have to do a right entire for the calibration to take usually. That's about it, guys. This will have your 6L80 shifting pretty nice, and you can play with that.